a friend of ours we've represented for 4 decades, Pat Mahoney, out of Washington, D.C., is with us on the phone right now and talking about protests and balloons. Pat, you've been protesting on and off over the Chinese embassy, in front of the Chinese embassy, for how long?
About 40 years. By the way, Jay, thanks for making me feel as old and grandfatherly as I am. But it's been a wonderful partnership. Yes, 40 years, probably 100 demonstrations peaceful demonstrations in front of the Chinese embassy.
So what happened? Tell everybody what you had with you when you went to the Chinese embassy. This was in the middle of when the actual event with the spy balloon that was for real was taking place. What did you do? What did you have?
So we had 2 large balloons, 2 feet in diameter each one, and we scheduled an event in front of the Chinese embassy, and it was called No to Spying, Yes to Freedom, where we wanted to challenge the Chinese government not to encroach on American sovereignty in airspace. But the real purpose, the main focus of the demonstration, was to stress the human rights abuses by the Chinese government and call on them to respect freedom, not to crush their own people, not to crush Christians and religious dissidents and Uyghur Muslims in Hong Kong. And so I applied for a special assembly notification plan application, which I do all the time. We had a group of people. I brought the 2 balloons, and something, Jay, happened to me at the embassy just 2 days ago that has never happened to me before.
Before you get to that, I want Andy. We're talking about, we've been litigating these kind of cases for literally 4 decades.
Yep.
Pat's on a sidewalk. It's called a traditional public forum, which means it's open for free speech.
Quintessential public forum. The park, the street.
Sidewalk.
Adjacent to a street, rather. These are places where First Amendment expressive activity has always been permitted and has always been allowed. That has been stated by the Supreme Court over and over again, Jim.
Including about 5 cases of ours, at the Supreme Court. Now, Pat, so you go there, and this time what happens?
So I get out of my car, and as I always do, I respect law enforcement. I honor them as a Christian and as an American. I introduced myself. They knew who I was. And I said, I'm going over to the public sidewalk in front of the Chinese embassy to conduct my peaceful protest. And for the first time ever, they said, Reverend Mahoney, if you demonstrate on that sidewalk, you will be arrested because that's not a public sidewalk. And Jay, I'm quoting right now, it's Chinese property.
Well, I want to stop right there because here's the problem. The Chinese government and the CCP is buying every piece of property they can buy all over the country. But, Jordan, they don't get to buy a public sidewalk.
No, they don't. And whether or not they had called in, I'm sure they did call in security because of the incident involving their spy balloon. Like you said, this overreaction, the immediate action by the State Department is to believe the Chinese.
Which, Pat, let's talk about that for a minute. That was the Secret Service that told you this, correct?
Speech.
They actually, Jay and Jordan, they actually brought in, they said, Reverend Mahoney, we talked with the Chinese embassy officials, and because of what happened with the balloon, they are very tense, and they told us that that's Chinese property. And I was stunned. I said, I've been coming here for years. That's public property. We had a cordial but direct discussion, and I said, I am going over there to peacefully demonstrate.
Stop right there. This idea that the Chinese government can self-describe property for themselves as if they're engaged in eminent domain is ridiculous. But it shows you what the Chinese – and the fact that the Secret Service initially agreed with them.
I mean, the government, instead of supporting the
Free
expressive
speech.
activity of one of its citizens, takes side with the Chinese. Incredible. Yeah, hard to believe that.
All right, so, Pat, you tell them you're going over there, then what?
So it's kind of a funny moment. My life sometimes is so crazy. I go, oh, wait a minute. I have my car parked here, and if I get arrested, they'll definitely tow my car. So I tell the Secret Service agent, just a minute. I'm going to move my car down on the street and come back. So I come back. I tell them you should get a supervisor. But I just want to add this. I understand the Chinese government saying it's their property. The fact that the Secret Service agreed with them And threatening an American citizen with arrest is one of the most stunning and disturbing things I've ever seen in 46 years of public ministry. So I go down onto the sidewalk. There by now are about 10 or 11 officers. There are 4 Secret Service cars, 2 motorcycle Metropolitan Police Department, D.C. Police Department there. And finally, a captain comes out. We're 20 minutes later. And, Jay, what I want to say, and I'm not trying to sort of lift myself up, but 99.99% of Americans, when they saw armed Secret Service agents and said, don't go on that sidewalk, it's Chinese property, you'll be arrested, they would have said,
Right.
okay, we'll go. But I said, I'm not going to be bullied. And, Jay, I love the ACLJ. So who's the first person I call? I'm out there on the sidewalk getting arrested. I called Jay.
We were on air when you called, and I had 2 of my colleagues. I sent them a note while Jordan was talking. Now, here's the end result. As of it is right now, we've got a letter going out to them saying, hey, look, this is not Chinese property. And we're serious about this. This is areas open for freedom of speech, and the Chinese do not get to dictate in the United States of America what the protests and First Amendment rights of American citizens are. But the fact that the Secret Service initially thought that was okay is scary enough. Pat, if people want information about your organization, what's the best place for them to go?
Actually, we're very live and vibrant on Facebook, so just go, and Twitter, so just do Reverend Pat Mahoney on Facebook, on Twitter, and Instagram, and that's the best place to get us because we move every day on different events.
Great. Thanks, Pat. We appreciate it. You know, the good news is we got it resolved. The bad news is that the Chinese government also thinks they can say that.
This is part of his ministry, so if he gets arrested, he gets arrested. He's not worried about that. But like what he said is that to most Americans, if that was the day you decide, hey, you know, I've had enough of them, I'm going to step out and actually do a peaceful protest, if Secret Service approached you, that would have been it.
You saw how many.
So
Let's put it back on the screen. How
the
many
ability
Secret
to
Service there
silence
was?
speech, the Chinese almost got what they wanted because most people would have turned around.
Yeah, I mean, look at that. I mean, there's in that picture alone, for
Trying
our radio
to figure
audience,
out who's right.
we've got a sergeant, a captain, Secret Service. They are dressed to like this is a serious engagement here. It looks like some Metro Police as well.
They don't defer to American rights. They
But
defer
mostly
to China.
Secret Service. They deferred to the Chinese government initially. That tells you something right there.